I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that's has gone down recently. I think everyone in their family knows about the tragedy that happened in Utah yesterday on Wednesday, and it is a tragedy. And I know a lot of people have talked about it. I don't know that I could add anything factual or any kind of other pieces of information. I think I'll get into that a little bit later. I kind of just wanted to talk about like my personal feelings on the matter right now before I get into any kind of thoughts or theories that I have. And it's also just still so early that there's such little known. There's so many hypotheticals that it's really too early to start coming to conclusions on motives. We don't even really know who did it necessarily. I'll just say one of the first things I had to say is that the actual video itself, if you haven't seen it, don't bother watching it. I have seen it too many times. I first saw it against my will, kind of against my will. I saw the far back angle, right? But then I saw the up close angle, and I wish I'd never seen that because I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older now, but I really don't like to see. I don't like to see that stuff, man. You know, I don't like gore. I don't like to look at that stuff anymore. Maybe when I was younger I could stomach it, but I don't know if it has something to do with me being older or maybe I'm more aware of my own um morality or mortality rather. But I would just rather not see those kind of videos, and I think if you can avoid stuff like that, it's probably in your best interest. I don't think you want to be consuming too much of that kind of stuff. It's not really good for your soul. And I've kind of been feeling like I kind of have been feeling the impact of it on my heart. And so this video is a good way of me kind of purging that and getting that out of my system. So when I watch the video, to me it's very clear that there's something very evil within it. And I know that's obvious, right? Because it's a guy damn near getting his head blown off. But there's something beyond that, something subliminal that just rubs me the wrong way. And it's this video has this really dark um, energy around it. I hate to say that because I don't like to use that word energy because I think it gets overused. But it really does have like this weird energy in it that I don't think anyone's ever really talked about. Maybe other people are just sensitized to it or desensitized to it. Maybe other people are desensitized to it, but I don't know, man. It's weird. And I've seen a lot of gore and stuff like that, so why it weirds me out so much, I don't know. I think it just has to do with the fact that he was such a well-known person. Um, and you know, no matter what you say about him or what your opinions are about him, I do genuinely think he was a good person. I don't think he was I didn't agree with him on everything. Mostly on Israel is kind of where we differed. I actually agree with a lot of his points outside of that. I do genuinely think he was a good person. I don't think he was being malicious. I think he was just kind of blinded by his support for Israel, and that's kind of why he had those certain talking points, if you will. But either way, there seems to be something very dark about that video. And the fact that it's been able to be so uncensored, you know, it's gone basically uncensored on social media, which almost never happens these days. And they've allowed it to be completely uncensored. And there's so many different angles and videos of it. It's the first real assassination in the modern social media age, you know? We got the Trump shooting, but it wasn't really that bad. There really wasn't anything to see. Um, and it obviously, at the end of the day, nothing really happened. It wasn't successful. Or the perpetrator wasn't successful. And, you know, no one really died outside from the people who got caught in the crossfire, but you don't even really get to see that very well. You know, Trump kind of just he kind of gets freaked out and ducks down, and that's that. But this shooting with Charlie Kirk was brutal, man. It was vicious. I mean, it was just it was groof. I mean, it was I tried to make up a new word there. I was gonna say it was brutal. It was gruesome and brutal, you know, and maybe we just weren't really ready for it. I don't think many people were ready for that, man. For that level of violence, you know, of uncensored violence and real violence, you know. You play these video games and you watch these movies and you think you'd be ready for stuff like that, but you just can never really capture the true essence of death and what death looks like. And you know, when I first heard about the situation, I thought it was fake. I thought this was like you know, there's no way, right? I thought it was AI or something, or it was some kind of meme or something. And then I found out that it was real, and I saw the video from far away, from the far away angle, and you know, I thought he might live. You know, I thought he'd be okay because they said he was shot, but he was in the hospital, so I thought he was gonna be okay. And then I saw the up close footage, and I knew instantly after the up close footage that I had just watched someone die. I had just watched a very prominent figure die, essentially. A very well known person be executed, be assassinated. And then it came out like 10 minutes later that he was dead. But like I said, I knew he was dead because you could see him. He dies in the video. He doesn't live past the video. I know they said that they were doing their best to keep him alive, and maybe he wasn't technically dead, but for all intents and purposes, that dude was dead. You know what I mean? Like, he was basically dead. Come in. Have I had dinner? Yes, I had some soup. But yeah, like I was saying, when I saw the video, I knew he was dead, man. You know? And, man, it was hard to watch, you know? And like I said, I don't know if it's just me getting older or what, but I feel like I just, I can't stomach it. And also, I don't think you should be able to. You know what I mean? I saw a video that was absolutely true. And it was this guy, and he was talking about how, you know, we should have never seen that. We should have never seen that video of him dying. That should have never gone viral. We were never supposed to see that. Our biology, we're not built to see stuff like that. Our biology isn't designed for it. Our biology, we're not designed to see stuff like that on a mass scale. You know what I mean? The only time you would ever witness something like that would be on the battlefield. That's the only time in history that you would ever witness something like that, would be on the battlefield. And now it's just everyone's seeing it. I mean, you know, God knows who's seen it, right? Your grandparents have probably seen it. Children have seen it. But even beyond all that, the thing that just gets me is the aura, and I don't like to say that obviously because it's become a meme, but there is this weird like energy in the video, I feel. And I really feel like, and I guess I'm not trying to get too conspiratorial too early, but I don't think I can I don't think it's necessarily conspiratorial for me to say that it's a ritual. That's just what my gut tells me. Not even on a conspiratorial level of like, what was it really about? But the fact that there is such a gruesome death that has gone uncensored on social media and everyone has had access to it and is watching it all at the same time, that invites shit, bro. That invites demonic forces that you don't want. You don't want that shit in your life. You don't want that in your brain, in your mind. You know, people think they can watch stuff and it doesn't become a part of their lives. And they can consume things and it doesn't really matter because they're cool. And that's just not how the world works, bro. That's not how it works. You can't you can't just consume stuff like that and then think you're gonna be okay. It's like that's why I say your body, your brain, your soul was never meant to absorb that. You know, it's just you're not built that way. It doesn't matter how tough you think you are. It comes down to biology. Biologically, you were never meant to ever experience stuff like that unless you went onto the battlefield. And you weren't supposed to experience it over and over and over again by watching all these videos over and over and over again. You know? It was supposed to be a one time occurrence. And that's that. But now you're able to experience it over and over and over again. And you're 5 feet away from the action. And that's brutal, man. I mean, that is trauma. I've talked about trauma before. And like how the internet traumatizes people. 9/11, that's trauma. This is trauma. It's traumatizing people, and it's going to traumatize an entire new generation of people. And I guess that's one of the things that you could say is, no matter where you are in history, whatever generation you're a part of, there's always going to be some kind of drama, right? Or not drama, excuse me, trauma. But it's just it's sickening. It's really sickening, you know. All right, so I guess I'll get into kind of my thoughts and for right now, and kind of I guess as a little time capsule, even though 100% things are gonna change. I think it's very strange the time sequence of events that happened. I think it's very strange that the news was reporting that there was an individual that was screaming or yelling, "I do it again," and then they capture this guy, this old guy who, is fits the bill for, or seems to fit the bill for shooters of today, in terms of ideology and I guess I should say ethnic background. I'm trying not to be too on the nose about it, but there's really no other way to put it. And this was the guy that they caught and said that he did it, and then they let him go. I've heard people talk about the fact that, he wasn't supposed to die, that he was actually supposed to live. And that was the guy they were supposed to pin it on. Which I guess could make sense in a couple different ways, because one, they took him to the hospital even though I'm pretty sure he was dead. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure it was instant. But they made a big deal about, that he was in critical condition, and that he was, they were gonna keep him alive, but obviously it didn't happen. There's also, I saw recently just today, there was a book that was published on September 9th called like the shooting of Charlie Kirk or something like that, which is insane. I know Amazon, the Amazon, whatever, the Kindle shit has like a different rules for publishing books, where they can have stuff where you can, it registers as being published before it's like really technically published, and it's this whole kind of convoluted, complicated thing. So I guess that could be part of it. I also know that there's been some theories about Israel, or who's behind it. And when I first was on 4chan and I was looking at it, and I was like seeing what other people were saying, and I was only on 4chan because it seems like people on 4chan are just a little bit ahead of the curve than other people in the population. I don't know why that is. It just seems to be the case. I don't have any kind of affinity for 4chan or anything like that. If anything, I think 4chan gets way too much credit because a lot of people are really scared of it and think that 4chan is just like full of I don't know, like dark web hackers or something like that, and it's really not like that. Like 4chan has a lot of idiots, to put it bluntly. Like, they're kind of stupid. But one of the things that I kind of heard getting talked about, that was a popular theory, was that the ones behind it was Israel, because Charlie had recently been regurgitating some, you know, I guess he was someone that was a diehard Israel guy that had started to show some doubt in Israel, and they killed him for that. Apparently, he was also afraid for his life, and that he was afraid that Israel would, kill him if he turned against them. Which sounds very weird to me. I don't know why. I don't know why a guy like him would say something like that. And I don't know why he would say something like that unless he had been getting threats, which I guess is possible. It's actually totally possible that he would get a threat and then say something like that and say, I think these guys might actually kill me. I guess that is 100% possible. But I think, like I said, on a deeper level, on the esoteric level, there's definitely a lot that could be analyzed esoterically. I don't think you really even need to go that far, to be honest. I think you just need to really understand that these kind of high impact events, whether it's 9/11 or a shooting or even a natural disaster or something like that, they have effects that reach far beyond what is currently, I would say, accepted or currently understood by any kind of sociology, anyone who understands sociology and stuff like that. I think we really can't understand the level of impact and the detrimental nature of these high impact events, because it goes down to the spiritual level. It's something that attacks. It's not just an attack on one individual. It is an attack on society, but it's also an attack on the spiritual realm. It's an attack on your soul. When you watch that kind of video, when you're scrolling through Instagram, and Instagram is pretty tame. There was that one incident last year where everything was uncensored for some reason, and gore was just on everyone's For You page. Outside of that, when you're scrolling through Instagram or any of these other things, you don't really think that you're just going to get bombarded with death like that. And that has major implications, because like I said before, we're not designed to be absorbing that kind of stuff. It's not in our blood, man. So I hope anyone that watched the video like me, probably too much like me, I hope that you're able to find some kind of solace somewhere. You're able to get away from it. You're able to find a way past it and distract yourself. Go outside, get in nature, get with God. Do something that gets your mind away from this stuff. Do something that you can do to cleanse your mind and cleanse your soul. Go meditate, go into nature, go to church, read your Bible. Do something to get away from it all. Because I think it could get very bad very quickly here. On a real note, it could get very bad very quickly. I could definitely see this being a domino effect. I think it's going to happen no matter what. It's just going to depend on who reacts and what is the amount of reaction that happens. Like, I don't think your average boomer is going to be arming up and, storming the gates or something like that. But you're going to see some of the more extreme individuals start to, move because they're ready, and rightfully so. People have been have been wanting this. People have been wanting a reason for violence. At least that's what it seems like on the surface. Maybe it could all just be, smoke and mirrors. It could definitely be smoke and mirrors, but at least people have been claiming to want this. So maybe people are finally gonna get what they want. Maybe the preppers are finally gonna get the societal collapse that they want. Maybe this is maybe this is martial law. Maybe this starts the chain reaction to martial law. Could also be very possible. I think the people that are taking this lightly and think that nothing's going to happen from it just don't really understand history. I'm not saying that something will 100% happen, like it's going to get really crazy. I'm not saying that. But to say that there's no chance of it is just the only reason you'd say something like that is because you have a very small understanding of history. History is just chain reactions. That's all it is. So one thing happens after another. This guy does this because this happens. This person does this because this happens. This person feels a certain type of way about gun control because they lived through this tragedy, That's how history works. And so to say that nothing's going to happen from this is probably not true. We don't know, what the actual level of fallout that we're going to get from this. We don't know if are we going to get a total civil war? Are we going to get gun control? Are we going to get, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? There's a lot of other stuff that's been going around in the news as well. But I don't really think I want to talk about that just yet because this was such a high impact event that was so consuming that it just warrants its own video. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of the other stuff is going to be forgotten because of it. I think one of the biggest downsides to this is you're probably not going to see much about Epstein anymore. That shit is over. That Epstein shit is done, bro. It's done. I'm sorry. There's no more Epstein shit, dude. There's not going to be any more mentioning of Epstein shit. Unfortunately, there will still be some people that will be championing. Is that a word? People will still champion it. People will still talk about it for sure, but it's going to be in small circles. It's not going to get the national recognition that it was getting before. People are just going to move on, man, and maybe that's why they did it, And like I said, there's a lot of other things I could talk about, but I don't really want to talk about it right now because my mind can only handle so much trauma, I guess. I would say the last thing would be the reaction of people laughing or making light of it. I don't want to say I don't care, but it doesn't really bother me that people are making fun of it because that's just the way people are, If you haven't realized by now that so much of the population is demonic, then you're just not really paying attention, The same people that are laughing about this are probably the same people that are pro-abortion. It's just obvious, They just don't care about life in general. Like, if you have a very low concept of human life already, then it kind of makes sense why you would laugh about something like that because you wouldn't care, It is scary though. I will say it is definitely scary to think about the fallout that's going to happen after this, the violence that is pretty much guaranteed at this point. I guess there's definitely some big hitters, some big speakers that are going to really make a difference. If Nick Fuentes comes out and says, death to the liberals and let's go to war and shit like that, then we'll go to war, and that's the way it'll be. I hope that you are prepared if that is the route that you want to go down. It's during the Civil War, right? Like the South had the right to fight back, and they were villainized for that, and maybe rightfully so. Maybe they shouldn't have fought back, but they did, and you kind of have to give them credit for that. And so, if that's what's going to happen, I unfortunately I think the reality of it is that like in our Western society we have become numb to the reality of violence, and we've haven't really. It's been a while since you know the you know most of the population has really ever endured a real violent brutal time. It's just so rare now. It's been rare, probably in the whole history of our country, except for obviously like the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, and then like the race riots and stuff like that. But aside from that, like there really hasn't been large scale brutality. It's just not something that has been going on. Um, for most people, I would say. I guess to leave it off on, like I said before, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you are getting right with God. That is always the main priority in these hard times. You never know when you could go. Especially when you're a champion for something like that. When you're just a champion in life and you are loud about what you believe, then you especially need to be right with God, because the devil can come for you at any moment. And I hope people don't get scared. I hope people aren't scared of speaking out for what they believe in after this. I hope people continue to talk and fight, and I hope that there is resolution at the end of it all. I hope it's not mindless killing. I hope it doesn't devolve into mindless killing. Charlie Kirk has a quote that I think fits really well, and he said something like, "When talking stops, violence begins," or something like that. I think that was him. Maybe it wasn't him, but either way, it's a really good quote, and I think it's true. And I think like at least if people are gonna have to die, if that's really what it's gonna come down to, I hope people are dying for a reason, dying for a cause. I hope it doesn't just devolve into mindless killing. War has a tendency to do that, where people just kind of end up dying for no reason, or for no right reason at least. And I really hope this doesn't happen. I hope there isn't just a huge rise in random killings. It seems like the whole world is kind of falling apart right now. All of society is kind of falling apart. People are anxious. People are angry, at society, at government, at God. Those kind of attacks are always non-linear. It's not just about the government. It's not just about this one individual. You know, one individual might be the target, or that might be the way that person is able to communicate their frustrations through the one individual. But they have a whole slew of enemies. You never just have one enemy. People always have more than one enemy, especially extreme people like that. Their enemy is truly God. That's really their enemy. It's not any one person, or anyone who's mentally ill enough to do something like that. Their enemy is really God, but they just take it out on righteous people. You know what I mean? And I don't think Charlie Kirk was the most righteous individual. I didn't agree with everything he said. Like I said, mostly on the Israel thing. Everything else I think he was kind of right about. I think he had a good head on his shoulders. I think he was a little bit blinded by his support for Israel. But maybe it's true. What the guy said on Twitter is true. Maybe he really was afraid for his life. I'm not really sure. But of course, more information is going to come out about this. It's going to make it even more complicated. Hopefully, that's not the case. Hopefully, we find out who the enemy is, what actually happened here. I highly doubt it. I think it's pretty much impossible to figure out what actually happened. I don't even know that it is as simple as who did it. You know, that question of who did it might not even make as much sense as you think it might. You know, that might be a very complicated question. It may be a what did it, or you know, how many did it, or who did it in terms of groups, like what groups of people did it, who was in on it. You know what I mean? Like with the JFK assassination, now they think it could be all these actors that were a part of that and were kind of working together. Was it that kind of situation? Did a lot of people want him dead? You know, um, I'm sure the answer is yeah. It would be yes. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would want Charlie Kirk dead. Um, you know, he because he was honest. At least, and he seemed honest, especially when he started to question Israel. He seemed genuinely honest about his inquiry and the problems that he had. He seemed like someone that wasn't trying to poke the beast, but had or felt like he had a true duty um, to speak about the truth. And that only happens when your heart is righteous and especially if you're a follower of Christ, that's the only time that stuff like that happens. Um, because obviously, if your heart is in Christ, your heart is based in the truth, and so it doesn't mean that you couldn't have false presuppositions, but you're gonna feel called to speak the truth. I think when he was talking about his growing doubts about Israel, I think he was speaking his truth, arguably the truth. And he was kind of starting to unravel that. His presuppositions were starting to be unraveled, and he wasn't afraid of that. He wasn't afraid of changing his mind or seeing a new perspective. He argued in good faith. Say what you will about the guy. The scariest part about it is that he was not a far right extremist. And I know for some liberals that are watching this, if there are any, liberals that are watching this, that may seem crazy to you, because everyone is far right to you. But I promise you, he was not a far right individual. I'm more extreme than Charlie Kirk is, and maybe that's why you think I'm the Antichrist. Okay, I get it, but Charlie Kirk was not a right-wing extremist. He was right-wing. He was moderately right-wing, maybe even more than moderate, but he wasn't extreme. And anyone that says otherwise just doesn't really understand politics in America. Nick Fuentes is an extreme right-wing individual. Charlie Kirk is not that. He's pro-Israel. He's not a racialist. He was not racist, at least openly. The craziest thing he probably ever did was crime statistics, and that's not even that bad in my opinion. Maybe you think that's heinous and evil, but in my opinion, it's really not that bad. Oh man. Anyways, I think I've done too much talking about this. I've been yapping for about 40 minutes. I'm probably gonna cut it up and put some different things in order because I feel like I talked about a lot of good things, but they were kind of out of order. Which is kind of why I miss doing these YouTube videos, because even if I'm just rambling and I don't have a script, I can still kind of manipulate and I still have more control over the final product. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys aren't too scared. I hope you guys are ready. I'm gonna look into buying a gun. That's the bottom line for me. I need to get armed. I think you guys should as well. Get ready. If it's a fight, that's the way it'll be. Unfortunately, that might be the situation. I hope it doesn't come down to it, but could very well happen. I'm going to pray that it doesn't happen, but I'm not going to not be prepared. I'm going to try my hardest not to be prepared. I think this should be a wake-up call for anyone that thinks stuff like this could never happen. I hope we have a new generation at least that witnesses this and realizes like there is this potential, because it doesn't do anyone good to be naive. Naivete hurts everyone involved. It doesn't do anyone good. You can't be naive, because that's the difference between you and life sometimes. Could be the difference between you and life. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
I go around universities and have challenging conversations, and because that's what is so important to our country, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
I've never seen someone do this.
Well, it's a growing trend, because people like me are facing violence, assaults. The left. Yes, the campus Antifa. I've been stormed out of restaurants. I've been assaulted publicly, multiple death threats.
Okay, so what's your goal in all this?
There's more people that agree with me than some people would actually believe, and they come out of the woodwork when I do stuff like this. We record all of it so that we put it on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their humanity.